I'm an Australian-born human rights lawyer and experienced interim CEO. Fawcett Society will be my 6th interim leadership position. I specialise in taking organisations through periods of change, transition, and sometimes crisis. I'm also a lifelong intersectional feminist who has really fought for women's rights throughout every job that I've ever had. It's something that's really important to me, and so I'm so excited to be coming into Fawcett at this exciting time in the organisation's history.
What are you most looking forward to about working at the Fawcett Society?
There are so many things that I'm looking forward to, so I'm probably not going to limit myself to one. But I think throughout my life, the work I've done to promote women's rights and support women and fight for women has often been quite focused on individuals. And so I'm really excited to be joining the Fawcett Society and having a bigger impact on a broader group of women, in a big picture sense, and really make some big changes that will affect the lives of many people. It has to be said that I'm really excited to be working with the incredible board of trustees that Fawcett has, the amazing staff team, and also just the millions of supporters. We've got all these incredible people who work with the organisation, and it's going to be such a privilege to meet them and work with them over the period that I'm here. So I'm really excited about that as well.
I just want to touch on something you said when you were talking about all the work you've done in the past, sort of fighting for feminism. Could you go into a bit more depth on some of that work?
I think having a feminist perspective in any role gives you the opportunity to see barriers that might be there for people that perhaps people who don't experience that kind of discrimination can't always see. So I've always spoken up against things that I see as getting in the way of women. And that might be speaking up in meetings when women might be being silenced. It might be talking to boards about increasing their diversity and really insisting that women should be on trustee boards and in senior management teams. When I've recruited people myself, I always think about how to make sure that I'm not excluding people who might have had different life experiences or have different demands on their time from being able to apply for a job. I've gone out to bat a couple of times for individual women who I felt were being discriminated against. One springs to mind around maternity. There was an issue that someone was being treated poorly and against the law around that kind of thing, and I was able to defend that and stop that from happening. And also speaking up about inappropriate behavior. I do come from, a relatively privileged background in a lot of ways, and I have also had a feisty temperament at times. So I've always felt confident in being able to say when I felt that it was unacceptable, when women were not being given the space to speak or were being silenced in some way. So I've really, it's really been something that's infiltrated everything I've done. Any job that I've ever had, I think people would know that I brought that feminist perspective, but also I guess the intersectional perspective. I'm really, really keen on equality and justice and making sure that lots of different voices are heard.
What's the most interesting place or job that you've worked in or done so far?
This is one of those questions that's almost impossible to answer because I love my job so much because I get to work on so many different issues. And, some of the organizations I work with are trustee run, completely voluntary, tiny teams that are doing things all the way through to places like Girl Guiding, which is, a large organization working across the country. I guess I get the opportunity to work with people who are passionate about such a range of different things. So it's really difficult to choose one particular area. But I did have a really interesting interim CEO role this year at the Shannon Trust, which is a prison-based literacy charity that trains prisoners who can read to teach prisoners who can't. And it's an extraordinary organization. It's really amazing the work that it does. It works in every prison throughout England, Northern Ireland, and Wales. And I came in on the 19th of March, so days before lockdown. And we had to find out ways of how we could reach prisoners who were locked in their rooms for 23 out of 24 hours a day. And it was one of those big moments in the organization's history of really questioning, do we put everyone on furlough and just give up, or do we actually fight through and come up with new ideas? And actually the organization came together and we had a really exciting period of time, which resulted in expanding the work the organization does in digital ways and working in the community, and also coming up with really innovative ways of reaching people in prisons during the lockdown period. So that was really fascinating and interesting because I hadn't worked in the prison setting before, and I learned a lot about literacy levels, for one thing, in prisons, which are a lot lower than the general population. So there's a lot of questions there around education and all the other kind of factors that might go into that situation. So that was particularly interesting. But there are so many organizations I work with, and I usually stay in touch with people and find out how things are going, because I find it so fascinating what they do.
Can you tell us what the last book you read was?
Sure. At the moment, I'm nearly finished How to Be Both by Ali Smith. I love Ali Smith, especially her Seasons series, which I just think is perfection. I recently finished Cavalier and Clay, which was set in the comic book world of the 1940s in the New York City, which was really different from anything I normally read, but it was very good.
If you could have 3 people at a dinner party, who would you have and why? And if you want something that you'll be cooking for them as well, we're always
something I'm going to be cooking for them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with living people, because I think if we include all people living and dead, it's just too hard. And I'd also say that, in a dinner party, I'd like to have more like 8 or so people, but we'll just say that we're going to have 3 special guests. So I'll keep those answers down. So the first person I would want is Bernardine Evaristo, who wrote Girl, Woman, Other, which I read during the first lockdown this year, and just found it one of the most extraordinary books I'd ever picked up. And I think that she has this ability to create real people in her writing, true, well-rounded women who are complicated and have personalities and strengths and frailties. And I just felt the fact that she was able to create so many different people meant that she must be an extraordinary person to talk to, and she must have an uncanny sense of human nature. And I think she would be fascinating. The second person would be Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. As an Australian, I am interested, obviously, in New Zealand politics, but I think that she's actually brought New Zealand politics onto the world stage. And I think the most powerful thing that I think she has shown is that empathy is not weakness, that you can be a leader with empathy and show great strength and effectiveness. And we're seeing just how effectively New Zealand has overcome so many challenges while she's been in power. And I think that that's been such a big impact for her. So and it's also something that I really believe in, that we have to approach everything with empathy and trying to understand where other people are coming from. And so I think she'd be just a brilliant person to come to my dinner party and be my best friend afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
And then the third person, I actually don't remember her name, unfortunately, but she's kind of symbolic in my mind of the extraordinary women I've worked with throughout many countries over the course of my career. I've worked internationally on lots of different issues, and I often work kind of with people at the grassroots who are often the unsung heroes, I think, of the kind of women's power movement. And there was one particular woman, so I was working in Iran about 10 or 12 years ago, and she was this incredibly bright young woman who'd gotten a scholarship to study in America and had chosen to return to Iran to fight for women's rights in Iran. And I'd spent a few days in Iran and had been found kind of the way that women are treated there quite confronting, because at times, people wouldn't even look at me. It was like I didn't exist. I had somebody stand in front of me once when I was talking to a circle of my colleagues. They just came and stood right in front of me. And it was really challenging for me as a Western feminist to be there. And I saw this woman who had given up her own personal kind of opportunities in America that could have led to, an interesting career there, to really fight for women on the ground. And I think for me, the women like that I've met throughout the course of my life and my career, who are in challenging situations and still fighting and really doing amazing things, I would love to have her for dinner and find out how she's gone over the last 10 to 12 years and just, continue to be inspired by her and people like that. So yeah, that would be my dinner party. And what would I feed them? That was the other question, wasn't it? Probably something fairly simple, so I could spend more time talking. So something that I could. I've got one of those pressure cookers, so really good for kind of slow cooked things. I make quite a good jackfruit slow cooked kind of curry type thing, which, assuming I've got some vegetarians or vegans, I could cater for that. And I also do a pear and walnut and goat's cheese, if people eat goat's cheese, salad, which is really easy to prepare in advance. So I probably do that, and something chocolatey for pudding, because I love chocolate.
Yeah,
lots of wine. I'm big on wine, actually. Very into my wine. So we'd have matching wines for each course.
What is the one thing you want, or something that you want Fawcett Society supporters and members to know about you? What would you want to tell them about yourself?
I think It's really important for people to know that I am an intersectional, inclusive feminist who sees empathy and compassion, and the ability to kind of debate in respectful ways is a really important thing for the women's movement. I think I live and breathe Fawcett's values and always have done throughout the course of my career, and I think that they're really important values that we desperately need in these polarized times. So I really want people to be aware of that and to know that I'm coming in, with that intention to really continue the work that's been done already by the Fawcett Society and by Sam, obviously, to be, respectable and credible and pioneering and outspoken and all those kind of things, so that we can achieve progress in a meaningful way for women.